What if I told you that women who cheat display specific psychological and behavioral patterns so consistent that relationship experts can identify them with surprising accuracy, and you might be missing these signs right now in your own relationship? Stay with me, because what you're about to learn could save you from months of confusion and heartbreak. Something feels off. You can't quite explain it, but the energy in your relationship has shifted. She's different somehow, not in an obvious, dramatic way, but in subtle ways that your gut keeps telling you to pay attention to. Maybe she's more interested in her appearance lately. Maybe she's emotionally distant even when you're physically together. Maybe she's suddenly very protective of her phone in ways she never was before. You tell yourself you're being paranoid. You push the thoughts away. You convince yourself that you're just insecure or overthinking things. But deep down, your intuition is screaming that something has changed. Here's what most men don't understand. Your gut instinct is often picking up on microsignals and behavioral patterns that your conscious mind hasn't fully processed yet. These aren't random feelings. They're your subconscious detecting inconsistencies in her behavior that don't align with how she normally acts. And when it comes to infidelity, there are specific psychological and behavioral shifts that occur. These changes aren't about playing detective or becoming paranoid. They're about understanding the deeper patterns of human psychology when someone is living a double life. Before we dive into the specific signs, you need to understand something fundamental about human psychology and deception. When someone engages in behavior that conflicts with their stated values or commitments, they experience what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, the psychological discomfort that comes from holding two contradictory beliefs or behaviors simultaneously. For example, I'm in a committed relationship versus I'm being intimate with someone else. The human brain cannot comfortably hold both of these truths at the same time. So it starts making automatic psychological and behavioral adjustments to reduce this internal conflict. Sometimes this shows up as overcompensation, being extra nice or affectionate to ease guilt. Sometimes it manifests as emotional withdrawal, creating distance to manage the deception. Sometimes it appears as projection, accusing you of the very thing she's doing. These aren't conscious, calculated choices. They're psychological defense mechanisms operating beneath her awareness, trying to manage the internal conflict she's experiencing. So, let's break down the 5 signs, starting with one of the most telling. Sign number 1. Sudden investment in appearance and self-presentation. This is often one of the first noticeable changes, and it can be confusing because it seems positive on the surface. She's suddenly very invested in how she looks. New clothes, new hairstyle, more attention to makeup and grooming, renewed interest in fitness, especially when these changes seem directed outward, not toward you. She's dressing up for work, for girls' nights, for errands, but she's casual and low effort when it's just the two of you at home. Here's the psychology behind this pattern. When someone is receiving attention from a new romantic or sexual interest, they unconsciously increase their effort in physical appearance. It's a biological and psychological response to wanting to be attractive to the person whose validation they're seeking. This is called impression management for a new audience. Now, self-improvement isn't inherently suspicious. People go through phases of wanting to look better and feel more confident. The red flag is when the effort seems directed away from the relationship rather than enhancing it. Ask yourself, is she excited for you to see her dressed up, or does she seem disappointed when you're the only one who notices? Is she maintaining her appearance for contexts that don't include you? If she's putting significant effort into her appearance but seems indifferent to whether you notice or appreciate it, that's a psychological indicator worth paying attention to. But that's just the surface. The next sign reveals even more about what's happening psychologically. Sign number 2. Emotional withdrawal and decreased intimacy. This one hurts because it feels like you're losing her, and you can't understand why. She's physically present, but emotionally absent. Conversations become surface level. She's less interested in your day, your thoughts, your feelings. The emotional intimacy that used to define your relationship has evaporated. And often, this is accompanied by decreased physical intimacy. Either she's avoiding sex altogether, or when it does happen, she seems distracted, disconnected, like her mind is somewhere else. Here's the psychological explanation. Emotional intimacy requires vulnerability and authenticity. When someone is hiding something significant, especially infidelity, they cannot show up authentically in emotional conversations. Every deep conversation becomes psychologically dangerous because she has to carefully manage what she shares, what she reveals, how much truth she can tell without exposing what she's hiding. So instead of navigating that complexity, she withdraws. She creates emotional distance because distance feels safer than the risk of exposure. Additionally, if she's developed an emotional or physical connection with someone else, her emotional energy is now divided. She's investing emotionally elsewhere, which leaves less emotional availability for you. You might notice she's less curious about your life, less engaged in planning your future together, less interested in the small daily rituals that create intimacy. The psychological principle here is emotional displacement. Her emotional bandwidth is being consumed by managing guilt, maintaining the affair, and creating psychological separation from you. Have you ever experienced someone becoming emotionally distant for no apparent reason? Drop a comment about how you handled it. But the third sign is where things get even more psychologically revealing. Sign number 3. Increased phone secrecy and digital hiding. This is one of the most obvious signs, yet men often ignore it because they don't want to seem controlling or paranoid. Suddenly, her phone is always face down. She angles the screen away when texting. She takes calls in another room. She's changed her passcode. She's deleting message histories or clearing her browser. Maybe she used to casually leave her phone lying around, and now it's always in her purse or pocket. Maybe she used to answer texts in front of you, and now she waits until you're not around. The psychological principle is evidence management. When someone has something to hide, they become hyper-aware of potential discovery. Every notification becomes a threat. Every moment you're near her phone triggers low-level anxiety. But here's the nuance that's important. It's not about the phone itself. It's about the behavioral shift. If she's always been private with her phone, that's her baseline. But if there's a sudden change from openness to secrecy, that shift is psychologically significant. And often, this isn't just about hiding messages from the other person. It's about hiding the emotional affair, the ongoing communication, the evidence of connection that reveals the depth of her involvement. Pay attention to her reaction when you're near her phone. Does she become visibly anxious? Does she make excuses to put it away? Does she get defensive if you ask simple questions about who she's texting? These reactions reveal more than the phone's contents ever could. And this connects directly to the fourth sign, which is one of the most psychologically fascinating. Sign number 4. Projection and sudden accusations. This pattern catches most men completely off guard. She suddenly starts accusing you of being unfaithful. She questions where you've been, who you've been talking to, why you came home late. She becomes suspicious of your female friends, your coworkers, your social media activity. And you're blindsided because you haven't done anything wrong. Here's what's happening psychologically. It's called projection. When someone engages in behavior they feel guilty about, they unconsciously project that behavior onto others. It serves two psychological functions. First, it reduces their own guilt by normalizing the behavior. If everyone cheats, then what she's doing isn't so bad, right? Second, it deflects attention away from her own actions. If she keeps you on the defensive, explaining yourself, proving your loyalty, justifying your whereabouts, you're not looking at her behavior. This isn't always conscious manipulation. Often, it's an unconscious psychological defense mechanism designed to manage her internal guilt and anxiety. The key pattern to notice: the accusations come out of nowhere. They're not based on any actual evidence or changes in your behavior, and they coincide with other behavioral shifts on her part. If she's suddenly convinced you're cheating when nothing in your behavior has changed, ask yourself, what's driving this suspicion? Is it actually about you, or is it her own guilt manifesting as projection? But the fifth sign might be the most emotionally painful of all. Sign number 5. Changes in schedule and unexplained absences. Her routine becomes less predictable. She has more work events, more girls' nights, more reasons to be unavailable that don't quite add up. She's coming home later with vague explanations. She's suddenly interested in activities or hobbies she never mentioned before. Her schedule has more flexibility and fewer details. The psychological pattern here is opportunity creation. If there's ongoing contact with someone else, whether physical involvement or emotional affair, she needs to create opportunities to maintain that connection. This requires building in time away from you, creating plausible explanations, and maintaining flexibility in her schedule that allows for spontaneous meetings. Now, here's the critical nuance. People's routines change for many legitimate reasons. A new project at work, a friend going through a crisis, a genuine new interest. These are all normal life developments. The red flag is when these changes coincide with the other signs, and when her explanations feel vague, defensive, or inconsistent. If you ask simple questions about her evening and she becomes irritated or defensive, that's psychologically revealing. People who have nothing to hide don't get defensive about basic questions. Additionally, pay attention to her availability patterns. Is she less available during times she used to be free? Does she have more spontaneous plans that conveniently exclude you? The psychological principle is compartmentalization. She's creating separate spaces in her life where you don't have access or visibility, which allows her to maintain the affair without constant risk of discovery. Now, let's be clear about something important. These signs are not definitive proof of infidelity. They're behavioral patterns that warrant attention and honest conversation. People can exhibit some of these behaviors for completely innocent reasons. Stress, personal growth, mental health challenges. All of these can create behavioral changes. The red flag is when multiple signs appear simultaneously, when they represent significant departures from her baseline behavior, and when they cluster together in a short time period. If you're seeing this pattern, the healthy response isn't to become a detective, install tracking apps, or go through her phone while she's sleeping. The healthy response is to have an honest, direct conversation about what you're noticing and how it's affecting the relationship. Use I statements. I've noticed you seem more distant lately, and it's making me feel disconnected from you. Can we talk about what's going on? Her response to this conversation will tell you a lot. Does she become defensive and accusatory? Does she gaslight you by insisting you're imagining things? Or does she acknowledge your concerns and engage in honest dialogue? Here's the deeper truth about these signs and infidelity. They're not really about catching someone in the act. They're about recognizing when the foundation of trust, transparency, and emotional connection in your relationship has been compromised. Because even if she isn't physically cheating, if multiple these patterns are present, it means something significant has shifted in how she relates to you and the relationship. And you deserve to be in a relationship where you don't have to play detective, where trust is the foundation, where both people show up with honesty and full presence. These signs are simply tools to help you see clearly what might be happening beneath the surface. What you do with that clarity is up to you. But never ignore your intuition. And never settle for a relationship that requires you to constantly question reality or suppress your legitimate concerns. So, here's the ultimate takeaway about recognizing infidelity patterns. Trust your gut, but verify with observation. Look for patterns, not isolated incidents. And most importantly, value yourself enough to have difficult conversations and make hard decisions when the evidence becomes clear. The signs I've shared aren't about making you paranoid. They're about giving you the psychological framework to recognize when something genuine has changed versus when you're just being insecure. Women who cheat leave psychological breadcrumbs, not because they want to get caught, but because managing a double life creates internal conflict that manifests in observable behavioral changes. Your job isn't to become hypervigilant or controlling. Your job is to stay grounded in reality, trust your observations, and have the courage to address what you're seeing. If this video gave you clarity on patterns you've been noticing, hit that like button. It helps other men find this content when they need it most. And if you want more insights into relationship psychology, female behavior, and understanding the hidden dynamics of dating and attraction, subscribe and turn on notifications. I decode the psychology behind relationships every single week. Drop a comment below. Have you experienced any of these signs in your relationships? How did you handle it? Your story might help someone else navigate their situation. I read every comment, and this community is built on men supporting each other with honesty and real talk. Remember, awareness is power. Understanding these psychological patterns doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you informed and able to protect your emotional well-being. Trust yourself. Value yourself. And never apologize for wanting truth and transparency in your relationships. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.